I'm frequently asked how I create the wood grain materials that I use in my models, and so in this video I thought I would show you how I turn photographs of boards into textures and how I apply them to a model. I'll use this little pedestal table as an example and make it a maple one. So before I can import images to use as textures, I need some faces to apply them to. And so what I'm going to do is draw a rectangle to start. I know the length of my boards, and I don't know the width, and I don't really care. It doesn't matter in this case. But I know that they're 126 inches long, and I'm just going to make rectangles that are 126 by 10. I don't know that it's necessarily important to do this or critical, but I'm going to reverse the face on that. And then I've got 6 images I've prepared. So I'm going to just go ahead and make copies of that rectangle. They're all the same length. There's 3 different widths. And so now I'm ready. I've got something for the material. So I'll go to File, Import, and in this case it's just opening to my directory. You can would navigate to where you've saved your images. Down here at the bottom I want to make sure I've selected texture. Some people will import images as images and then explode them, but then they have to go through the process of resizing and doing some editing in the materials editor, and this will get around all of that. So I've selected texture, and I'll just select one of these. Let's do the unstained maple. I'm just going to use those first 6. And click Import. And I'm going to start at this lower left corner on the rectangle, and I'm going to drag this over to the end, and you can see this particular board is less than 10 inches wide. So that image is going to repeat. That's all right. Sometimes that happens in boards. Now, if we look at the materials editor, if I select that and go to Edit, you can see that it shows me the length, which I already knew, and it tells me what the width is. And we'll let the width be whatever it needs to be for this. And now I have that maple in there. I'm going to repeat the process for the next material, since I'm doing the unstained ones. Now you can see this one's going to be wider than 10 inches. And it just gets cropped to fit the rectangle that I drew. And that's all right. We don't care about that at this stage. Just want to get these things into the model so that I'll have the materials in the in-model collection here. All right. Repeat. You could set up a keyboard shortcut if you do this an awful lot. So there's a stained version, and import. Oh, let's escape. And I started that one in the wrong place. Number 2. This is the same on the Mac. You can do the exact same thing there. And one more. Double click. And there we go. Because of their file names, they're sorted, it turns out, by their widths. You could change the names if you want. Just type it up in the box up here. So if I make that unstained, and we'll change that one to unstained, and that one to unstained. At least I'll know when I hover over them what the situation is, what I've got. I may add other colors, so I have those 3 raw images, and I could edit those later in an image editor and use a different stain if I wanted to do that. Now, this is great. I've got these in this model, but I'd like to be able to use them in another file, in other models. So in this case, on the PC, we can just click on the details, and we could save this collection if we want to. In fact, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to save this whole collection of materials, and it's going to my materials folder. So we'll make a new folder, call it Maple, select it. All right, so now this shows it's in the Maple folder, and the next thing I want to do is I want to add this collection to my favorites. We have to go back up one level here and choose Maple and select the folder. So now that's going to show up in my favorites list here. These are all above this dividing line, are all the materials that are shipped with SketchUp, but now I've added this Maple. So the next step will be to apply it to my pedestal table. We'll do that in the next bit here. So here's my table ready for having the Maple textures applied, and I'm going to start on the top. I've used layers to control the visibility for the different scenes here, and as you can see, my table extension hardware is already textured. That's because I used that component out of a different model. And so here's my top. By the way, both of these tops are related. So, and I've opened the component so that I have access to the faces. We'll go to Materials, find our library, and let's use the stained Maple 2. And when I first apply this, because the material runs horizontally, it's going to tend to favor that red axis, which means that the grain is running the wrong direction on the top here. You can see where the line is, where the image is going to repeat. Of course, the image has to repeat because it's only so large. The top is wider than the material. But we're going to handle that a little differently here. The first thing I'm going to do, though, is rotate the texture. So I right-click on that face and then choose Texture, Position, right-click again, and choose Rotate 90 degrees. And then you can see that if you want, you can just grab that material and move it where you want it. What I wanted to do is I want to make sure that down here on this corner, I don't have my material overlapping there a little bit. We'll just let it run off the edge of the top there so we don't have a strange little light spot. Now, we still have that repetition going on here, and that's not that bad, but it is noticeable that this same little detail in here shows up over here and up here. So let's fix that. The other thing is, I don't think I would make this top out of a board that's as wide as this one is, so probably make it out of something narrower. So I'm going to divide the surface so that I can handle each section separately. And the way I'm doing that is I've selected the edge face of the top just because it's already there and it's the right size. I'm going to use Move Copy, and let's make it, let's see, 6 times 3. Yeah, we'll make them 6 inches wide. That last one isn't quite, but that's okay. And before I do the delete that, let's run an intersect model with selection, and then I can get rid of those. Erase, and do the same on the other side. We'll use the delete key this time. And then there's internal faces, which is why we get these white edges or white lines along the black. It's the face showing through because the graphics card can't deal with that properly. So I'm going to hide this edge face for a moment and then select those faces and delete them, and then use Edit, Unhide Last to put that back. You can see that, get down here, that I don't have that white line there now. It's not that big of a deal, but it's kind of unsightly, and it's a cleaner model if you get rid of those internal faces anyway. Alright, so now we can handle the positioning. So for each of these sections, so I'm just going to move that down a little bit. And really you don't have to worry too much about this. You just need to get into a different area where, so it doesn't look like the texture just repeats. We get out of here now, you can see they look pretty clearly different there. Let's do the same thing here. And I don't know, we'll take that section. And I'm not being real careful with this for this video. I think you get the idea that you can just move the texture around and kind of get rid of some of that repetition. This has got a lot of that ribbon grain in it, so it does look a little bit repetitious. We could maybe, let's do this. Let's flip that up and down. And maybe that works all right. I'll leave it in any case. So now we've got to do the rest of this top. And so what I'll do is well, actually, let's do it this way. I'm going to get the paint bucket tool, hold Alt to sample, release the Alt, and then I should be able to go through and do the same thing here. Now you can see that the material needs to be moved. So we'll do that a little bit here. And I'm doing it on the underside, and I'll show you why in a moment, but if it wasn't going to show, you probably wouldn't worry about that, but I'm going to let it show here. And so I want to try to avoid that bit. The fact that I've got this really long texture is nice because I can pick different areas of it just like I would in real life. Oh, and let's do this while we're in here. I'm not going to worry about the end grain. Sometimes I make an end grain material or multiple end grain materials. I'm not going to worry about it for this. And because it's not going to show that much anyway. But now you can see that when we look at the two halves of the top, they're very clearly mirror images of each other. So my fix for that is to open this right-hand top. It doesn't matter which one I use, but I'm going to flip this in the blue direction. The reason I'm doing it this way is it allows me to, and I need to move that texture, but I can do that without affecting the other top, the top surface of it anyway. But it allows me to maintain the dynamic link between these two because they're instances of the same component while having different textures. Of course, if I had a profile on the edge of the top or something to that effect, I would need to handle this differently, and then I would have to use Make Unique. Whoops. Let's open that for editing and soften those edges. So I'm holding the Shift key while I'm hiding those edges. Forgive me. And we'll hide those edges so they don't show. And we'll go underneath here while we're working on this and do the same. And there we go. I'm going to go ahead and apply the material to the apron. And that's pretty simple. I just open it for editing and paint it on there, and it comes out correctly. I'm not going to do the leaves, but I will do the pedestal. The pedestal is made up of 8 identical components. The staves are all just copies of the same component. And so if I were to, let's do it down here on the bottom because it's larger and it'll be easier to see. I'm going to rotate the material 90 degrees, and I want to position that, I don't know, that'll work. But now you can see the material gets mimicked all the way around, so that doesn't look especially realistic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate these. I don't like doing this if I don't have to, but I'm going to use Make Unique. And what I'll do, because you can't see both sides of the pedestal column at the same time, I'm going to make these unique in pairs. That will save me a little work. So Make Unique, Make Unique. And so now it's only those two are related, or these two. Alright, so let's go back to this one. And this one is actually just ready. Since I've already moved the material, I sampled this face and then applied the material to the rest of the component. And that'll work for that. This one, I'll move that texture. We'll use a little different chunk of it. Maybe we'll come in there. And done. And then just triple click. If you get the paint bucket tool, you can sample this face. I'm holding Alt. And then apply it after you've done that. And we'll go back to the select tool. Space bar is quick for that. We'll do the same thing here. So position and just pick a different area. You don't even have to get too far away from that. It just won't show. But this will help to make that all look right. And one more set. And we can go to the top end here of the board and repeat the process. There we go. Now, I'm going to do one more thing here to the component just to make, I should have done this before I opened it, or before I made them unique. It's not the end of the world, but I'll just do two of these to show. So I'm going to open this for editing, and then I'm going to just select the face and its edges by double-clicking. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. And then I'm just going to use right-click and choose Hide. So the stave doesn't look very nice at this stage, but if I do that on the next one, I'll move a copy of that one over here so you can see again what I'm doing. Double-click there, and here, and hide. Make sure you don't hit erase. But you can see now that this doesn't look like, you don't see the glue lines, basically. And we could go around and do the rest of the pedestal that way. But I'm going to save that for later, and I'll do the legs next. And so here, everything is softened, and if I just apply the materials this way, I'm going to have a problem. So what I'm going to do is turn on the hidden geometry. I've got a keyboard shortcut for that. And we'll just use our maple tool. And I just applied the material to this face, and I'll do it on this side as well. And then I'm going to rotate it. And this time I don't want to rotate it by 90 degrees at some angle. I don't even know what it is because I never bothered to find out. But I've got these push pins, and I'm going to just grab the green one and rotate until that blue radial line seems to run about generally parallel to the overall shape of that leg. And we'll move that up a little bit and click Done. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. And so texture, position. By the way, the green, I'm going to move this down here a little bit. We'll just take a different section of this. And we want to go this way. So there's the dashed radial or dashed arc. That shows the size of the material. If you come inside that, you can scale the texture down. But if you want to keep it the same size, then make sure you stay on that curve. Done. All right. So now we need to do the top surface here. And I'm going to handle that a little differently. First, since this edge is softened, I'm going to use just sort of a trick with the TIG weld extension. I've just double-clicked to select this face, and by clicking on weld, I just have a keyboard shortcut for that. It makes those edges unsoftened. I'll do that again. I'm not sure that that's necessarily an intended feature, but in this particular case, it works nicely for pulling out that edge. But now that gives me this top surface that I can texture independent of the sides. And to put the texture on here, you could, in fact I'll do it, you could just apply it this way. but it tends to not look very nice. So let's undo that. So I'm going to use a little different method here. And I'm going to, well, let's see. I'm just going to do this kind of the long way. I'm going to set a guideline up here. And I'm just eyeballing the angle. I'll make it 40 degrees just because, but this angle is more to, it's just to give me a sort of a guide. Again, it's kind of rough alignment with that kind of the average of the face, the top surface there. And I'll just move that over here. Doesn't even matter that much exactly where it is, but now I'm going to put the material on that face, and I'm going to rotate it, move it around just a little bit. And this one, so I'm done there, I'm going to go back into this, and I'm going to choose projected. And I'm going to project that texture onto the surface of the leg there. And I'm going to open the leg for editing, get my eyedropper, and sample the material off that face. And even though you can't see the texture there, you can still sample it. And then I'm going to apply that there. And while I'm at it, I'm going to use that same material on the rest of the leg. Those other faces don't really show, but, and now I'm finished with that, and we'll get rid of our guideline. Looks like a nicer texturing there. So you can see I still have a few things left to texture. I'll take care of those shortly, but I wanted to show you one other thing. And that is, if you have a material in your model and you want to edit that, you can, of course, edit right in SketchUp. So here I've got the Maple 2 texture selected, and click on the Edit tab. And I can make changes here, so I could make that texture a different color, make it lighter or darker, that sort of thing. But another way you can do that is to edit in an external image editor. In order for this to work, you have to go to Preferences and Applications and choose the file that opens your image editor. In this case, on my PC, I'm using a freeware image editor called Paint.net. So I've selected that from the program files. And so now if I open or right-click on the thumbnail, I can choose Edit Texture Image, and that image opens in Paint.net. So I could make changes to this material. Let's see, just for grins, I'm going to make it black and white. And then I'm going to save the change. And when I go back to SketchUp, you can see that that material is now black and white, or grayscale. I'll go back here and undo that and save the change again. And it's just automatically updated in the SketchUp file. So that's a pretty slick deal if you want to modify your materials. Maybe you start out with a raw, unfinished wood and you want to add a finish, a stain color to it. You can do that, or you can modify that stain color later. There's a lot of control in the external editor that you don't have right in SketchUp, so it's handy to be able to do that. I hope you can find something to take away from that.